Hello and welcome to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and this evening I will be doing my February reading wrap-up. This month I read 7 books in total and started an 8th, and I will be going through them in chronological order as usual. So first I read a novel, Vox by Christina Dalcher. This is basically one of those many dystopias that followed in the footsteps of The Handmaid's Tale. But this one was actually pretty good. I think the trick this time is that I went in with very low expectations, and thus they were actually surpassed in a major fashion because I actually really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. So the main character, Jean, lives in a future version of the United States in which a theocratic government has risen to power. Now, the special thing about their anti-feminist dystopia is that each woman and each girl gets fitted with a bracelet which shocks you as soon as you reach a 100-word limit. So even less than the words allowed in a tweet, right? And if you exceed the limit by 5 words, you get a slight zap. Then the further you go, the more extreme the shocks get. I mean, I think it can end up killing you, basically. And the rest is, no reproductive rights, men control the household, the income, women can't work, etc. I mean, it's pretty similar to The Handmaid's Tale, except there isn't like the forced breeding program. And Jean used to be a neurolinguist, and she specialized in a specific type of aphasia that is triggered by damage to a very specific part of the brain. And she gets called in because the president's brother had a skiing accident and has aphasia, and so they want her expertise to treat him because she was like this close to having a cure for that particular type of aphasia. It's a pretty straightforward story. The chapters are very short. You read this very, very quickly, but I liked it. It was streamlined. The world building was solid. I mean, classic at this point because, we've had The Handmaid's Tale since the 80s, but it was all coherent. It all fitted together nicely. Now, I don't know if it's because I've read a lot of books and watched a lot of movies and TV series, but I kind of guessed the main clincher of the story, like, halfway through. I was like, this is what's going to happen, and that's exactly what happened, but it didn't bother me. I was actually very proud of myself for guessing it right. It was fun. It was entertaining, It's just what I needed. A good, solid read. I mean, it's nothing extraordinary. That's why I didn't bother doing a review of this, because, The Handmaid's Tale is at the top. It's in the same vein. And there's another very good book in the same vein called When She Woke. I would also recommend that if you like that subgenre. But yeah, it was enjoyable, solid world building. That was a nice surprise, actually. Really nice surprise. Now, at the same time I read Vox, I also read this book, Women in Science by Rachel Ignotofsky. I say at the same time because what I'm doing again this year, and which I also started to do at the end of last year, is I'll read a fiction book and a non-fiction or graphic novel, graphic non-fiction book at the same time. So Women in Science, as the title suggests, is about, female scientists throughout history. And, let me put it simply, this is an absolutely gorgeous book and very informative, very interesting. I learned loads of new stuff reading this. Now, let me give you a sneak peek. This is what it looks like inside. I mean, the illustration style, the graphic design, I think is really, really beautiful. So each time you get a female scientist, you get her bio, you get, her main achievements, little factoids about her, even a quote by said scientist, and of course, an illustration of her. And every time, you've got these gorgeous color schemes and like little symbols of their specific area of expertise. And it covers all types of scientific discipline: math, astronomy, physics, chemistry, biochemistry, biology, zoology, botany, neurology, medicine, of course, even psychology. And I think she was very generous to include a psychoanalyst because I don't really think psychoanalysis actually qualifies as science, but moving on from that. In any case, I learned about so many new things. And it's actually quite sad that I didn't know like 2/3 or even 3/4 of the female scientists mentioned in this book. Of course, you've got the big names like Marie Curie, Jane Goodall, Rachel Carson, Ada Lovelace. But then a lot of names I've never heard of. And also, funny thing, names I'd heard of, but without realizing it. So I studied science, more specifically biology at uni, and I came across a lot of names I'd actually seen in my textbooks. And I was like, oh, right, her. For example, Barbara McClintock, who discovered jumping genes in corn. That was in my genetics course. I was like, oh, right, that was her. I remember now. So that was fun. And the selection, beyond the discipline aspect includes, of course, a lot of European women, but also women from Asia, African American women. There's an Iranian mathematician. So no, it's a great selection. I think it's originally geared towards a younger audience because there are like a couple of pages about what are the materials of the researcher or the scientist. A lot of stuff I'm familiar with from, doing lab work at university once again. But it's great for any age, really. It's just so informative. I basically have nothing really negative to say about this book, except just one teensy tiny detail. Now, I do believe the author got wrong. The Corey cycle is mentioned in this book, and it's not so much a mistake as perhaps a misunderstanding. She says that the Coreys, so the couple of scientists, solve the mystery of how sugar is converted into energy. But that's not exactly the Corey cycle. The Corey cycle has to do with lactic acid. The cycle that has to do with pure conversion of sugar into energy in the mitochondria, that's the Krebs cycle. And I should know because there's so many bloody memes for science nerds about the Krebs cycle, and you have to learn the bloody Krebs cycle in biochem. But you really have to know this stuff to even notice it. But so, apart from that, it's a flawless book. And it's also infuriating because the number of female scientists who got the Nobel stolen from them, basically, by men who piggybacked onto their research or actually stole their research is just, And once again, like I said, it is so sad that I didn't even know a lot of these women. We should learn about them in school when you have a course on the history of science. You shouldn't just mention the dudes. You should mention a lot of these amazing women. And I also purchased the Women in Art book by the same author and illustrator, which I will be getting to this month. So very excited about that. After that, I read 2 classic works of science fiction, both published in the Science Fiction Masterworks collection. First, I read Babel 17 by Samuel R. Delany. Now, I did a review for this novel, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. Basically, I was overall underwhelmed by it. I don't think it's a bad novel by any means. I just think it didn't really work as a story or even as a fully fleshed out development of the author's central thesis, which has to do with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, also known as linguistic relativity. So the idea is very interesting, and there are interesting elements of world building, but it doesn't really coalesce into a coherent whole. And I thought there were flaws in the storytelling, just things that didn't make much sense or were just a bit meh. I am interested in reading something else by Samuel R. Delany. I'm looking at Dahlgren, though it won't be anytime soon, but so that's always a good sign if I want to try something else by the author. After that, I read another, even older work of science fiction, I believe, More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon. Now this, to me, was very bad, actually. I also did a review for this novel, so if you want to check that out. Yeah, this absolutely did not work for me. I mean, whereas Babel 17 was kind of like, meh, I'm a bit disappointed. This was like, what? Are you serious? Are you kidding me? No, I was really annoyed by the end. I mean, it was really interesting at the beginning. I was really taken by the story, actually, even though I thought it was weird, but I thought it was good weird. Then it steadily started to go downhill, and by the end I was like, oh, seriously? That's what you're going with for the ending? Really? All right. So, yeah, major fail. But again, I'm glad I read it. I'm enjoying reading these older works of science fiction. I find it interesting. So at the same time I read those 2 novels, I read a non-fiction book about what I will call population genetics and genetic anthropology or genomic anthropology. So it was A Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived by Adam Rutherford. This book was a Christmas gift, so I had no original intention of reading it. In fact, I've never read a pop science book about genetics, but I did study a bit of genetics at university, so I was like, oh, well, that's cool. A bit of a refresher on the subject with, of course, also updates on, current research. So the main focus of the book is to take a look at the current data on human evolution through the means of genetic and genomic analysis to look at, patterns in people's DNA and look at how people migrated. It's split into two parts. The first part just really takes a deep dive into that subject matter, looks at when our species emerged, how we crossed with Neanderthals and Denisovans and even perhaps other hominids. It also looks at, like I said, patterns of migration and genetic groupings, mostly in Europe and the UK, although there is a chapter on North America as well. And to look at, how we evolved even in recent-ish history, like how we developed lactose tolerance in European populations around 8000 BC. And that's stuff I'd actually studied at uni, like the lactose tolerance gene, which I found really fascinating at the time, which has appeared in different populations like 4 or 5 times independently. And when it comes to North America, also it looks at, well, when did the Native Americans arrive in North America? How are they related to South Americans? It also discusses, an important issue of the ethics of all this research, because there have been abuses in this field of research. Unfortunately, Native Americans have had their DNA not necessarily taken against their will, but used for other things than what they had agreed to. So that was an interesting discussion. And now, whilst I remembered a lot of things I had learned at university, I also learned new things, like how we're basically, all of us in Europe, the descendants of a single person around the 15th century. I know it sounds very weird, but mathematically it makes sense. And that all humans on Earth today have a common ancestor around 4000 BC. I might be getting the numbers slightly wrong, but something to that effect, which is fascinating if you think about it. The first part was good. Unfortunately, it goes downhill after that. The second part of the book is a lot more disordered and muddled, because he goes away from the main subject of human evolution to talk about how racism is ridiculous from a scientific point of view, which, don't get me wrong, is absolutely right. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I thought racism was idiotic since I was very young, because from a purely logical point of view, it just didn't make sense to me, but okay, whatever. He talks about eugenics as well. There's a whole chapter about Darwin and the guy whose name I've already forgotten, apologies for that, who basically created eugenics, but also came up with a lot of statistical analysis methods, which are still used today, so he did contribute good things to humanity, right? And they knew each other, and he talks about how the media are quite shit at, well, reporting on scientific findings, which is true, which is something that annoys the crap out of me. And I'm always saying people need to be better educated about basic scientific things, and the media need to do a better job of reporting on, medical studies or scientific research. Sure. But the problem is he belabored the point to such an extent. I was like, I'm sick of this, mate. Can we just move on to something else? Can we get back to the interesting scientific stuff? I guess if it was a book about that specifically, I wouldn't mind, but that's not supposed to be the main subject of the book. So I was like, yeah, all right. The author also just got increasingly condescending and moralizing, and also contradictory in places, just railing against creationists and people who believe in magical thinking and want to see things in genetics that just aren't there. There's like a couple of times where he says, you shouldn't mix mysticism with science, and I was like, who said you should? Where did that come from? Who are you addressing with that sentence? Like, I'm pretty sure creationists are not going to be reading this type of book. I'm pretty sure racists aren't going to waste their time with this type of book. I'm pretty sure authoritarian eugenicists are going to be wasting their time with this type of book. So what was the point of that? As to the contradictions, I would have enjoyed more discussion about the concept of speciation and, well, the concept of species, point blank. So I studied the mechanisms of evolution and speciation, not in depth, obviously, I never got that far, but I did say that at university, so I had a lot of that in mind when he was talking about Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. He said, we are different species, but we still crossbred. That leaves a lot of questions, so what does that mean exactly? Is it that the speciation process had not completely finished? Because there are examples in nature with bird species where you can actually see the process happening in real time, sort of. Also, even with the concept of racism, like I said, race is a bullshit concept in science, but I would have enjoyed like comparisons with other species. Like, for example, you've got the red fox and the silver fox, they are the same species, but they've got this amazing color variation. So is that what's happening in humans, that you have just these wild phenotypical variations in response to certain triggers in the environment? Or, I mean, it gets selected because of adaptive advantage, I mean, stuff like that. So I would have enjoyed more hard science, basically, is what I'm trying to say, and not this moratorium. I don't know, it got really, really annoying. Even with the question of, should you test your genes with these companies? He was saying, no, it's mostly bullshit. But then, on the other hand, he says, oh, the ideal would be for everyone to get their genome analyzed at birth. And I'm like, are you serious, mate? Really? And you're not even going to develop that? Alright. Or the question of whether or not we're still subject to natural selection, I am of the opinion that we're not really. He seemed to agree with that, but again, it was just very wishy-washy and got bogged down into moralizing considerations, which was very disappointing. Basically, I would not recommend this book. I've seen that there are other books on this subject that are much better, much more focused on the science and nothing else, so I will probably be seeking those out, and I would suggest you do so as well. After that, I continued with my exploration of classic science fiction. First, I read Rendezvous with Rama by the famed Sir Arthur C. Clarke. I haven't done a review yet. What I will be doing is a combined review with the book I read after this, which was Ringworld by Niven. I'll come back to this one in a minute. So I'm not going to go into too many details. I enjoyed this. I really did. This is one of those stories I actually recently learned is in the big dumb object subcategory of hard science fiction. I think that's really funny name, but yeah. The big dumb object in question is the spaceship named Rama that just pops into our solar system, and humans have colonized almost all the planets in the solar system, and so all the governments are like, what the hell is this big thing now? And they send a team to explore it. That's the basic premise. It worked. It was a straightforward story. There is a genuinely felt sense of awe at what the explorers find. I didn't give it more than technically 3.5 stars, because it was a simple story in a way. It was just very focused on that big dumb object. But don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm very difficult when I rate things, so for me, 3.5 or 7 out of 10 as I understand it in my mind is a good rating. I enjoyed this, and great introduction to Arthur C. Clarke. I don't know yet if I'll be reading anything else by him, but I might. It's a good start in any case. Then, like I said, I read Ringworld by Niven. This was a bit more complicated than Rendezvous with Rama. I gave it 3 stars as well, but just 3 stars, or in my head, 6 out of 10. Again, it's a story of the big dumb object, and a bit more. I think the story's a bit more complex than with Rendezvous with Rama, but that's the basic premise. There's this big world artificially created in the shape of a ring rotating around a star, found by a crew of several different aliens because, well, humans have colonized other planets and they come into contact with other alien species, and all of these people trade and have communications with one another, etc. And one of the alien species is migrating, and they've come across this ginormous ring world, literally, and so they want to know what's up and how was this thing created, who created it, is it still inhabited, etc. That bit is very interesting. It was fascinating to read about the descriptions of the ring world, and you do get a sense of awe as well, just like I did with the big object in Rendezvous with Rama. And this is on an even bigger scale, mind you. Like, it's described as having the surface of 1,000 Earths, and it's rotating around a star. I mean, it's actually hard to imagine, but I did get a sense of, like, whoa, what the hell? And it's a very original idea, honestly. So that was really cool. But, there were serious issues with female characterization. I'm not overly sensitive to this kind of thing, but, like, even I was like, oh, come on, really, must we? By that I mean selling a woman, or just random sex scenes that added absolutely nothing to the story. I mean, think HBO Game of Thrones, sex scenes thrown in just for the hell of it. Like, I don't mind a well-written sex scene. I can even enjoy that if it has a purpose, but, like, even I was like, seriously, dude? This is so freaking random. So, yeah. On the other hand, the interactions between the alien characters were interesting, but that female character, and there's a whole subplot with her, and her relationship with the other male human character was like, it was a bit much. Even for me, it was a bit much. So that was disappointing. And overall, it affected my rating of this novel. But again, I'm so glad I read it, and I will be going into a bit more detail when I do my dual/combined review in a few days. And that was it for the month of February. As I also mentioned at the beginning of the video, I did start reading The Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories, but I have not finished. I'm reading this over 2 weeks because I'm reading it at the same time as other novels. Like I said, I do this with non-fiction books and graphic novels and all graphic non-fiction books, but I also decided I would do this with short story collections. So far, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying H.P. Lovecraft a lot more than I did Arthur Marken. I will be finishing it this week, and I will probably do a review and of course mention it at the end of the month of March. Have a lot of other exciting books to read in March. Again, a couple of science fiction masterworks titles, and a book by China Mieville, and also Women in Art, so lots of good things to look forward to. Please let me know if you've read any of the books I mentioned, if you enjoyed them, didn't enjoy them, etc. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a lovely day or evening. I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye.